On a routine flight from Chicago to Los Angeles, Adrian Cole never expected that the seat next to him would be filled by Maya Bennett. The woman he once loved him, the mother of a boy who might just be his son. All wounds are reopened and secrets come to light. Adrian finds himself questioning everything he thought he knew. With danger lurking and the past threatening to tear them apart, will Adrian and Maya be able to rebuild their shattered family? Before we dive into this emotional journey, hit the subscribe button and tell us from where in the world you're watching. You never expect your world to change at 35,000 feet. Not when you're on yet another routine flight, heading to yet another board meeting. In yet another city where your name carries more weight than your presence? That was my mindset when I boarded the flight from Chicago to Los Angeles, a familiar trip on an unfamiliar day. I had just settled into my first-class seat. Window view as always, suit pressed to perfection, and noise-canceling headphones ready to drown out everything. Everything except the noise inside, me the noise I'd mastered silencing over the years. The memories I had buried, the guilt I had boxed away. But that day, fate or maybe karma decided it was time to open the box. The flight, when it happened. A child's soft laughter pierced through the monotone hum of the aircraft. I barely noticed it at first. Kids laugh all the time, but this was different. It wasn't the sound that caught me. It was the familiarity. It was a tone I hadn't heard in years. Innocent, musical, and oddly comforting. I glanced toward the aisle. Flight attendant passed with a cart of drinks, and behind her to rows down a boy. No more than 2, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly behind his ears. His legs dangled freely off the seat, and in his small hands he clutched a well-loved plush elephant. He turned his head, and that's when I froze. Those eyes, God, those eyes. Green like shattered emeralds. Exactly like mine. My chest tightened. I sat upright, blinking rapidly, convincing myself it was a coincidence. Genetics are strange. It could happen. Then I saw her, Maya, sitting beside the boy, her arm draped protectively around him. Her eyes, those soft, dark eyes I used to wake up to, were shadowed with exhaustion, but unmistakable. Her features hadn't changed, still heartbreakingly familiar. Still, the woman who disappeared 3 years ago, without a word, without closure. I couldn't breathe. My heartbeat slowed and quickened all at once. A symphony of confusion and rage and something else I didn't want to name. What was she doing here? Why now? Why with him? I looked again. The boy Yili, I would soon learn, was flipping through a picture book, his lips moving silently. Maya reached over and gently fixed the collar of his tiny shirt. She didn't see me. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to do. The logical part of Mitha, billionaire CEO of Cole Global, the man who built empires, told me to look away, to focus on my itinerary, to stay composed. But the man inside me, the one she left behind, couldn't. I watched them for minutes. That felt like lifetimes. The child's features haunted me, his expression when concentrating, the tilt of his chin, even the way his brow furrowed. It was all me. There was no mistaking it. That child was mine. But how? Why didn't she tell? Me. And just like that, the plane felt too small, the air too thin. I unclipped my seatbelt and stood up, brushing past the flight attendant. I needed to see her, hear her voice, understand. I walked down the aisle slowly, each step heavier than the last. When I reached their row, I paused. My shadow fell across their laps. She looked up. Her eyes widened. Her hand went to her chest as if her heart stopped. I saw recognition, fear, and guilt flash across her face in an instant. Adrian, I nodded. My voice failed me. My gaze shifted to the boy. He looked up curious, then smiled. A smile that cracked something deep inside me. I managed to whisper, "Hi, Maya." She stood abruptly, placing herself slightly between me and the child, protective as ever. "What? What are you doing here?" I wanted to ask the same. The words that came out were, "Is he mine?" The cabin around us faded. All I could hear was the dull roar of the engines and the louder roar of my thoughts. She hesitated. "I think we should talk." "After the flight," she said. I nodded. The rest of the flight dragged in aching silence. I returned to my seat, staring out at clouds I couldn't focus on. My mind played every memory I had of Maya, how we met. How she laughed, how she used to hold my hand when we were alone and call me her compass. And then, the night she left, no note, no trace, just absence. I thought she'd chosen someone else. Or maybe she couldn't take the pressure of being in the media's glare. Never, not once did. I think she was protecting me. By the time the wheels hit the runway in Los Angeles, my life had changed. Forever, and it hadn't even begun to get complicated yet. The flight attendant brought a fresh cup of tea to Maya. She held it like it was the only warm thing left in her life. Though the plane's temperature was perfectly regulated, across from her I couldn't stop staring. Eli was still asleep, a little drool pooling at the corner of his lips. He didn't know that the man watching him like a miracle was the father he never met. Wanted to hold him, say his name out loud, memorize his laugh, his breath, his heartbeat. But it wasn't the right moment. Not yet. Maya, why? I finally asked, "Why did you disappear?" She inhaled deeply. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. There's always a choice, I replied, the edge in my voice betraying years of pain. You walked away without a word. I searched for you. I filed reports. Hired investigators. I thought you were dead. Her hands trembled. The teacup rattled slightly. Adrian, I didn't leave because of you. I left because of what your world would have done to me and to Eli. I looked at her, really looked. She was thinner, yes, but her eyes still had that same fire, dimmed now by years of survival. The kind of fire a woman builds when she's had to shield her child from storms no one else sees. Explain, I said. Maya glanced down at Eli and tucked the blanket tighter around him. You remember Daniel Marsh? My jaw clenched. Yes. CFO of the company? Still a snake? He came to me. Threatened me. Told me if I didn't leave, he'd make sure I paid for everything you were about to expose. I blinked. What? He said. If I stayed, he'd leak a false story tying me to a money laundering scheme. He even forged fake papers, Adrian, and I was pregnant. I knew the media would eat it up. We were about to uncover something big. He couldn't risk me being used as a pawn. Rage surged in my chest. He did this to protect himself. She nodded. He said he'd ruin both our lives to bear your case. I knew you'd protect me. But if you did, it would destroy everything you'd built. I didn't want that for you, so you disappeared. I moved to Denver. Changed my name. I raised Eli alone. Never took a dime from you. I just wanted him safe. I felt like I was drowning in my own breath. The betrayal wasn't hers. It was Marsh's, and I had trusted that man. I'd led him into every boardroom and every decision. Why now? Why this flight? Going to visit my sister, she said. She just had a baby. I was finally starting to feel like we could breathe again. We sat in silence for a moment, and then Eli stirred. Mommy? Maya smiled, brushing his hair back. I'm here, baby. His eyes opened, then met mine. He blinked it. Me? Uncertain? Who's that man? He asked sleepily. I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek. I'm a friend of your mommy's. My name's Adrian. He mumbled, then yawned and buried himself into his mom's side again. Want to be in his life? I said softly. I know, Maya whispered. I was just waiting for the day you'd find us. When the flight touched down in Los Angeles, the weight of the unexpected encounter had not lessened. My hands were still cold, my mind replaying the images of Maya and Eli over and over. As I walked through the terminal, trying to appear composed, for the sea of business people and tourists, I spotted them again, Maya, gently adjusting Eli's coat, whispering something to him that made the boy giggle. I couldn't just walk away. Hey, Maya, I called out, hesitating as the words left my mouth. She turned. The hesitation in her eyes told me she had expected this, perhaps feared it, but she didn't run. She waited. We stood face to face, and time folded into itself. 3 years apart had not dulled her beauty, nor the way my heart sped when she was near. But now there was something else. The child beside her, wide-eyed, curious, and undeniably familiar. Adrian, she said softly. I glanced down at Eli. How old is he? Her lips pressed together, a storm of thoughts behind her eyes. 3, she replied finally. The world tilted beneath my feet. Later that evening, after making sure my meetings for the next day were cleared, I sent her a message through the hotel concierge. I didn't expect her to reply, but she did. We met at a quiet diner near Westwood, far from the glare of any social media cameras or business reporters. She sat across from me, a cup of tea untouched between her fingers. Why didn't you? Tell me, I asked, voice low. Maya's gaze dropped to the table. Because I didn't want to be the woman who ruined you. Blinked. You were about to take over your father's empire, Adrian. The Marsh family was watching every move you made. I heard things. Daniel was already trying to find ways to discredit you. He said some cruel things about me, about what a scandal would do to you. So I left. Daniel Marsh. The name lit a fire in my chest. He had been circling like a vulture, waiting to snatch the company from my family for years. He'd whispered poison into boardrooms and laid traps in contracts. And he had threatened Maya. You could have told me. I would have protected you. She shook her head. I wasn't willing to risk you. The silence between us was thick. With unsaid words, is he mine? I asked finally.
Ow.
Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded. The next day, I met Eli properly. He was shy at first, clinging to Maya's coat and peeking at me from behind her leg. But he had my eyes, that same stormy gray I saw in the mirror each morning. And when I offered him a toy car from the hotel's gift shop, his face lit up. You like cars? I asked. Eli nodded. I want to go vroom like Lightning McQueen. I chuckled. That's my favorite too. Maya looked at us, her expression caught between joy and sorrow. Can we spend the day together? I asked her. Just us 3? She hesitated, then nodded. Let's take it slow. We spent hours at the California Science Center. Eli was fascinated by the space shuttle and kept asking me questions about the stars. It's about rockets. It's about why the sky was blue. And I answered every single one like it was the most important question in the world. That night, after I dropped them off at the small rental house she was staying in, Maya lingered at the car window. What? He's always asked about his dad. She said I never had a real answer. But now. You don't have to do this alone anymore, I told her. I want to be there for him. For you. She stepped back, visibly torn. I need time, Adrian. I've lived in fear for so long. Fear of Daniel, of your world, of losing everything again. I nodded. Take all the time you need. But I'm not going anywhere? The following days were a blur. My schedule in LA was packed, but every free moment I spent with Eli. Slowly, he warmed up. He began calling me Mr. Adrian, then just Adrian. And once he whispered, Daddy. When he thought I was asleep in the hotel room beside him, I didn't correct him. My heart swelled. Ow. But Daniel Marsh was still a shadow on the horizon. I had my assistant dig deeper into the corporate ledgers and email archives, especially from the time Maya left. What I found made my blood boil. Falsified documents, anonymous threats, even an internal memo recommending Maya be handled quietly. He had orchestrated it all. One evening, I brought the files to Maya. She read in silence, her hands trembling. I wasn't paranoid, she whispered. No, you were hunted. At night, we sat on the front steps of her rental. Eli was asleep inside. The stars above Los Angeles seemed brighter than usual. I still love you, Maya, I said quietly. She turned her head, searching my face. I never stopped, I continued. Even when I didn't know where you were. Even when you disappeared without a word. And now, seeing you with Eli, it makes everything make sense. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I replied. But I'm more scared of never having the chance to be your family. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was hopeful. She reached out, and our hands found each other, fingers intertwining as if they had never let go. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about rekindling love. It was about rebuilding a life that had almost been lost to fear and power, and I would fight for it with everything I had. The tension in my chest had barely eased since returning from the park with Maya and Eli. Everything felt heavier. Now, my heart, my thoughts, the very air I breathed. I stared out the window of my office at the LA skyline, wondering how a single flight had unraveled everything I thought I knew. Maya had agreed to let me see Eli again, but the wounds between us were far from healed. That first meeting, after years of silence, was like walking barefoot over shattered glass, painful, jarring, and exposing. Every step forward felt like it cut open another old scar. I was pacing, waiting for the clock to bring 3 p.m. the time. Maya said I could visit them at the modest townhouse she was renting on the east side. I'd offered to send a car. She declined. I'd offered to have them come to my penthouse. She refused. Her boundaries were clear. I could visit Eli, but only in her world, not mine. And honestly, that seemed fair. When I arrived, I noticed the place was clean, small, and filled with secondhand charm. A modest bookshelf stood by the door. Eli's toys were neatly stacked in a blue bin beside the couch, and on the wall hung a framed photo of Maya and Eli, both laughing, eyes glowing in the sunlight. She opened the door in jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup, no performance, just Maya. "You're high," I said, my voice cracking more than I wanted. She stepped aside silently, and I walked in. Eli ran to me almost immediately. "Adrian," he shouted, the way only a toddler could twist a name with affection. My heart swelled. We spent an hour coloring, another playing blocks. He asked if I could come again tomorrow. I said I'd love to. Maya smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. When Eli was down for a nap, we sat at the kitchen table. "Why didn't you tell me, Maya?" I whispered. Her gaze fell to the chipped rim of her coffee mug. "Because I was scared. Because I didn't trust the people around you. Because Daniel told me things that made me believe staying away was the only way to protect him." I clenched my jaw. Daniel Marsh, my CFO, my so-called friend. The same man who had whispered doubts in my ear about Maya's loyalty, who claimed she'd leaked confidential company documents just before her sudden disappearance, who said she took a payout and left, and I believed him. I was a fool. "Did he threaten you?" I asked, voice low. She nodded slowly, not directly. "But he said if I didn't leave quietly, he'd make sure you lost everything. That the SEC was already watching you. If I stayed, they'd use me as a weapon against you." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Why him? Why would he do this?" "You trusted him too much," she said. "And he wanted your company. He thought if he controlled the chaos, he could eventually control everything else." I swallowed hard. Everything was beginning to click. The financial inconsistencies we found last quarter, the projects mysteriously delayed, investors pulling out last minute with vague reasons. Daniel had been sabotaging me from within, and Maya had paid the price. "I'm going to fix this." I said, "For you, for Eli, for everything I didn't see back then." She looked at me with tired eyes. "You can't just fix it, Adrian. Some things can't be undone. Some things can be rebuilt," I replied. Over the next week, I became a constant presence in Eli's life. I'd pick him up from daycare, bring over groceries, sometimes just sit quietly on the porch with Maya while he played nearby. Slowly, the wall between us began to lower, brick by brick. But I knew I couldn't just be a good father. I had to be a man Maya could trust again. So I started digging. I had my legal team quietly audit Daniel's activity. I brought in an independent forensic accountant. What we found made my blood run cold. Unauthorized fund transfers, fake vendor accounts, shell companies tied to Daniel's brother-in-law. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built an empire of deceit right under my nose. Worst of all, he'd used Maya as the scapegoat. Made her disappearance seem like guilt. He'd used her love for me as a weapon. When I showed Maya the documents, her hands trembled. "I thought no one would believe me," she said. "I didn't," I admitted, "and that's on me. But I'm here now, and I'm not walking away." We sat there, not as lovers or enemies, but as to people who had been deeply hurt and were now daring to heal. The weight of silence between us began to shift, and in its place, something fragile but hopeful began to bloom. The air buzzed with anxiety the evening of the fundraiser. I had thrown countless high-profile dinners before, but this one wasn't. About charming donors or smiling for the press. This was war disguised as elegance. Maya looked radiant, yet nervous in her navy blue gown, her hand clutching mine tightly as we entered the grand ballroom. The moment we stepped through the doors, I felt the shift. 100 eyes turned our way. Not just because we were a spectacle, Adrian Cole once solo. It's now flanked by a woman with history in her eyes and a child that mirrored his smile, but because they sensed something unspoken brewing. Daniel Marsh stood at the center of it. All laughing beside the governor, his hand wrapped around a glass of champagne. His eyes locked on mine as we approached. That smile, that sickeningly sweet snake-like grin, it didn't reach his eyes. "Dreen," he said, extending a hand. And Maya, ... What a surprise. "It's been a while," Maya replied calmly, though her voice was tight. Eli clung to my leg, unsure of his place in the room full of cold stares and expensive perfume. "Yes," Daniel said smoothly. "A lot has happened in 3 years. You've been busy." I didn't bother with pleasantries. We all have. But tonight's not about the past. It's about building futures, isn't it? Daniel raised his glass. Indeed. As we moved deeper into the room, I felt like we were walking a battlefield. Everyone was watching, calculating. Maya leaned toward me and whispered, "Why do I feel like I'm in one of those nightmares where you're naked in front of a crowd?" "Because this room is full of wolves," I murmured back. "And they just caught the scent of something they want." Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Daniel took the stage like he always did. Confident, eloquent, every word rehearsed. But beneath the polish, I saw it. The twitch in his jaw, the way his gaze kept flicking toward me. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the podium, with Maya and Eli seated beside the board members. "Good evening," I began, scanning the crowd. You know me?" "Is that for the last 3 years, a man in this room has been siphoning money from our company, laundering it through shell entities and charitable fronts, including ironically the very foundation hosting tonight's event." A murmur rippled through the crowd. My eyes locked with Daniel's. "I have documents, testimonies, and after tonight, full report will be submitted to federal investigators." Gasps, stares. The governor choked on his wine. Daniel stood up slowly. "Adrian, are you seriously hijacking a charity event to smear someone's reputation?" "This isn't about reputation," I said evenly. "It's about truth." Daniel laughed, but it cracked around the edges. "This is absurd. You've got no proof." "I do," Maya said, rising from her seat. She held up a folder. "I worked in your finance department, Daniel. I was silenced 3 years ago. Not this time." He paled. Eli looked up at me, confused. "Are we mad at him?" I crouched down and whispered, "No, buddy. We're just telling the truth. Some called it a smear campaign. Others applauded our courage." Daniel was detained for questioning the next day. "I didn't think I'd ever be strong enough to face him," she whispered. "You weren't alone." "This time," I said. She smiled. "No, I wasn't." Eli toddled over, his tiny arms wrapping around our legs. "Can we be a family now?" he asked. Maya and I exchanged a glance, and I felt something in my chest break open and fill all. "At once, we already are," I said. That night, in a quiet house full of healing, I finally felt like the richest man in the world. Chapter 6. The family we choose. The days following the confrontation at the dinner unfolded in slow, surreal waves. I'd spent the night turning over every word Maya had spoken, every glance Eli had given, me searching for the meanings between the moments. There was something deeper about this new chapter of my life I hadn't yet processed. Something about the weight of family that extended far beyond bloodlines or last names. Maya and Eli stayed in the guest house at my vineyard estate. I didn't, though it was clear Eli already thought of the place as a dream playground, pointing out deer grazing on the edge of the trees, his laughter echoing against the marble. Those moments, unscripted, innocent, were the purest things I'd experienced. She was slowly shedding the armor she'd worn for so long. We talked about the past, about the day she left, about the morning she found out she was pregnant and realized she was on her own. Her voice trembled as she told me how she'd been followed, how Daniel's people made it clear she had to disappear or risk everything. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of secrets. Tired of running. I didn't know who else to be, she said one night, her fingers curled around a mug of tea. But I see you now, Adrienne. I see Eli. And I want us to be whatever this is. Together, if we can figure it out. I reached across the table and took her hand. For the first time since we met again, she didn't pull away. A week later, we sat in a small cafe downtown where the waitresses knew Eli's name and brought him extra whipped cream. That day, Maya had agreed to come to the house for dinner. A real dinner, not guarded, not just for Eli's sake. Something had shifted between us, quiet and gentle, like gravity had pulled us back into the same orbit. Maya was different now, stronger, not hardened, but weathered like stone against the tide. I loved her more for it. I don't want to hide anymore, she said softly, brushing a crumb off Eli's shirt. Not from you, not from what we could be. It was the first time she'd said it aloud. The walls we had built between us were crumbling, not in a burst, but brick by careful brick. That weekend, I brought her and Eli to my parents' house. My father was a formidable man with a legacy steeped in acquisitions and controlled boardrooms. My mother, once a socialite, had turned to sculpture and silence after my brother's death. I didn't know how they'd react to Maya, to Eli, but I knew I needed to try. Maya stood tall as we entered the mansion. Eli, wearing a little blue button-up, clung to her hand like a lifeline. My mother, surprisingly, was the first to move. She knelt down and looked Eli in the eyes. You have Adrienne's eyes, she said gently. Eli tilted his head. Mommy says they look like warm chocolate. My father exhaled and looked away, hiding something, maybe pain, maybe guilt. But he nodded. We're late for dinner, he said. Let's not waste time. It was the closest thing to acceptance I could ask for. That night, after Eli had fallen asleep in a spare bedroom, Maya and I stood on the balcony. You really think we can do this? She asked. I know we already are, I said. We're building something, Maya. Not perfect, but real. I never thought I'd get to have this. Family. Safety. A chance to exhale. You do now, I said, pulling her close. And I'll never let anyone take it from you again. Still piecing ourselves together, but the space between us no longer held resentments, just history, memory, and the hope of what might come next. For once, I didn't feel like a billionaire fighting to keep everything under control. I felt like a man standing in the warmth of something he thought he'd lost forever. A family, a future, and finally, a reason to stop running from the past. The morning after the dinner felt different. The sun streamed through the penthouse. Windows like golden paint, and for the first time in days, Adrienne felt a sense of stillness. Maya sat at the kitchen counter, her fingers curled around a mug of tea. Eli, still in his pajamas, giggled in front of the television. Adrienne had barely slept. His thoughts swirled with images of Daniel, the board, the whispers from the dinner, and Maya's trembling hand holding his under the table. But today, things had to be different. He had decided to stop running from the past. He took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. I have a meeting with the board this afternoon. I'm going to tell them everything. Maya looked up, startled. Adrienne, will destroy you maybe, he said. But they already tried once, and they destroyed you instead. I won't let them win again. She stared at him, then slowly nodded. I'm with you. The hours leading up to the meeting felt endless. Adrienne dressed carefully, wearing the same navy blue suit he'd worn when he first pitched coal innovations to investors years ago. It was a symbol not of his status, but of his beginnings, of everything he had once believed in before power, money, and betrayal tangled the path. Before he left, he knelt by Eli, who looked up at him with curious eyes. Are you going to fight the bad guys today? Eli asked innocently. Adrienne smiled. Softly. Yeah, buddy, I guess I am. Eli threw his arms around Adrienne's neck. Then you have to win. I will, Adrienne whispered. The boardroom at Coal Innovations was sterile and cold, with modern steel chairs and emotionless glass walls. The men and women seated at the long table were familiar, some friends once, others indifferent puppets of Daniel Marsh. Daniel sat at the head of the table, his smirk oozing confidence. "Adrian, I wasn't expecting you today," Daniel said, folding his hands. "But since you're here, I hope you're ready to explain your personal distractions." Green placed a stack of documents on the table. "I'm here to talk about the missing funds, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, all linked to you." The room went still. Daniel's smirk faltered. "Careful, Adrian, that's slander." "No, it's evidence." Adrian slid the documents across the table. "If the board doesn't act on it, I'll go public." Murmurs broke out among the members. "You don't have the majority." "Any more," Daniel said, his voice sharp. "You've been too distracted with your new family." "Wrong again?" Adrian turned to one of the younger board members. Amelia. Amelia stood. "I've seen the reports. Adrian is right. The misappropriated funds are real. If we ignore this, we're complicit." Another member, Terrence, followed. Move to freeze Daniel Marsh's assets pending investigation was a domino. By the end of the hour, Daniel had been suspended and escorted out. Adrian stepped out of the boardroom and into the lobby, his chest heaving with emotion. Maya stood waiting, a hand clutched to her heart. "You did it," she said, rushing to him. "We did it," he whispered, wrapping her in his arms. Back at the penthouse that night, the mood was different. Eli sat between Adrian and Maya on the couch, his head bobbing as he fought sleep. Adrian felt a calm he hadn't known in years. The storm had passed. The truth had been spoken. Something new had begun. Maya rested her head on his shoulder. "So what now?" Adrian kissed the top of her hair. "Now we build again. Together, no more secrets." Outside the window, the city lights flickered. But inside, everything glowed with quiet peace. The morning after Adrian's powerful address to the board brought an unfamiliar calm. It was as though the storm had passed, but Adrian knew better. There were always shadows trailing the light. He stood at his office window, watching the Los Angeles skyline breathe under the early sun, his thoughts consumed by a single man, Daniel Marsh. Adrian's father had once warned him, there are two kinds of men in business: those who fight clean and those who wear smiles while dragging knives. Daniel Marsh was the latter. Adrian remembered all too well how Marsh had positioned himself as a loyal soldier while discreetly siphoning funds, falsifying reports, and stirring division among the board. And now, Adrian was done waiting. Called Maya. "I'm going to confront him today," Adrian said. "I need this behind us. I need to know he's out for good." Maya, who had just dropped Eli off at a nearby daycare, took a deep breath on the other end. "Be careful, Adrian. Daniel doesn't fight fair. You know that? I know. But I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago." By noon, Adrian walked into the executive suite with heavy steps, his presence enough to silence the room. Daniel was already seated, legs crossed, that smug smirk painted across his face like armor. "To Cole." "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Daniel asked, leaning back in his chair. Adrian didn't sit. He stood tall across from him, jaw clenched. "Heart steady. I know what you did to Maya. I know how you orchestrated the leak that forced her to run." Daniel scoffed. "Please. She left on her own. Couldn't handle the pressure." Adrian placed a flash drive on the table. "You embezzled over $4 million over 3 years. You buried Maya's research and manipulated the board into believing she was the leak. All to protect your own trail." Daniel's smile faltered. For the first time, the shadow shifted in his eyes. "You're bluffing," Daniel whispered. "Am I?" Adrian said coolly. "Because this drive contains internal messages you thought were deleted. The shell companies you used to move funds, and the testimony of 2 compliance officers you threatened. I also hired a forensic accountant." Daniel's smirk dissolved. Completely. "I've already sent copies to the board," Adrian continued. "We'll be having a vote in an hour. If you have any dignity left, you'll resign before then." Daniel stood abruptly. "You think this makes you the hero? You? Think she'll love you again because you took down the villain?" "No," Adrian said. "I think this makes me accountable." The fallout was swift. Daniel was removed from the board and escorted from the building. News of his embezzlement would soon hit the press, but Adrien didn't care about public perception anymore. For once, it wasn't about shareholders or headlines, it was about doing the right thing. Maya met him in the hallway outside the boardroom. Her expression carried a mix of relief and disbelief. "You really did it?" she asked. Adrien nodded. "He's gone." She looked at him, really looked at him as, though seeing him anew. "You didn't just save the company. You saved me, Adrien." He reached for her hand, hesitant. "I should have done it years ago." Maya squeezed his hand. "We can't change the past, but we can start again." Later that evening, Adrien visited Eli at the park. The boy ran up to him without hesitation, wrapping his arms around his leg. Adrien knelt down, eyes stinging as he looked into the little boy's face. "You know," Adrien said softly, "you have your mom's courage." Eli tilted his head. "And your eyes." "That's what Mommy says." Adrien laughed, a pure, unfiltered sound that had been missing for far too long. Maya stood a few feet away, watching them. The sun set behind her, casting a warm halo around the woman he never truly stopped loving. This wasn't the end. It was the middle. And maybe, just maybe, it could lead to something beautiful. The rain hadn't let up all night. It tapped steadily on the window pane of the guest room in Maya's apartment, the same room Adrien had slept in after their late-night conversation. It had been a sleepless night for him, not because the bed was uncomfortable, but because his mind replayed every second of his reunion with Maya and the raw emotion in Eli's hug. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, looking at the streaks of water that blurred the city skyline. He felt like he was standing on a threshold, not just between night and day, but between the past and the future. Behind him, small footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mr. Adrien. Eli peeked into the room, his stuffed elephant trailing behind him. Adrien turned, heart swelling. "Hey, buddy. Couldn't sleep either." Eli shook his head. "I had a dream, about a castle. You and me were there, and Mommy too. We were a family." Adrien knelt to his level. "Sounds like a really nice dream. Can it be real?" Eli whispered. Adrien didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled Eli close and whispered, "That's what I want to, Eli. I promise I'll do everything I can to make it come true." Later that day, Adrien and Maya met with their lawyer to discuss how to shield Maya and Eli legally. Adrien's connections had found enough financial paper trails tying Daniel Marsh to illegal shell companies, but bringing that to light would expose Maya to the public and Eli as well. "Not afraid," Maya said during the meeting. "Not anymore. Lived in fear for 3 years. I'd rather stand in the storm than keep running from it." Adrien placed a hand over hers. "You won't be alone, ever again." They decided to go public. Adrien scheduled a press conference to make a bold declaration not just of the corruption in coal ventures, but also to reframe the narrative that had been used to drive Maya away. The press conference was held in a glass-walled atrium. Porters buzzed with curiosity and anticipation. Adrien walked in, flanked by Maya on one side and his legal counsel on the other. "My name is Adrien Cole," he began, voice steady. "I've been the CEO of Coal Ventures. But tonight, I speak not as a businessman, but as a father, and as a man who nearly lost everything because of lies, manipulation, and silence." Gasps echoed as Adrien pulled out documents showing financial misappropriation linked to Daniel Marsh. More gasps followed when he introduced Maya as his ex-wife and Eli as his son. "But I want the world to know I'm proud of who they are, and I will protect them with every resource at my disposal." The public response was explosive. Social media erupted with sympathy and support. Adrien's transparency won over even the most skeptical investors. More importantly, it isolated Daniel Marsh. Within 48 hours, Marsh was suspended. Within a week, he was under investigation. That night, Adrien, Maya, and Eli sat on the couch watching cartoons. For the first time in a long while, laughter filled the room. "Daddy," Eli said casually, testing the word. Adrien froze. "You said ... double quotes." Eli nodded. "That's who you are, right?" Tears threatened to spill, but Adrien smiled through them. "Yeah, buddy, that's exactly who I am." and the rain finally stopped outside. Their storm was over. The days that followed our very public revelation were a whirlwind, a strange, calming storm of relief, love, and resolution. The news of Daniel Marsh's corruption and Adrian's honorable stand made headlines. But unlike past scandals that chased Adrian like shadows, this time the spotlight was healing. Adrian and I spent hours together after that night quietly. At first, mostly watching Eli as he played with toy trains, or as he showed Adrian the scribbles he made in a sketchbook. Adrian was patient, eager, overwhelmed in the best way. I could see it in his eyes every time Eli looked up at him. Guilt, and an overwhelming drive to never let either of us go again. One afternoon, we found ourselves in the sunroom at Adrian's estate, Eli nestled between us on a big plush couch. He was drawing something stick figures, apparently, but when he handed it to Adrian, we both gasped. It was 3 people. A tall man, a woman with curly hair, a boy with a bright yellow sun above his head. That's us, Eli beamed. Daddy. Mommy and me. Adrian looked at me, eyes glassy. He said, Mommy. My throat tightened, a tear slipping down before I could even respond. It was the first time Eli had said it since we'd reunited. And while I never expected him to just fall back into calling me that, hearing it now was everything. We were finally becoming a family, not just by biology or by obligation, but by choice. By love. Weeks later, Adrian asked if I would consider staying at the estate permanently, not just visiting, not just temporarily. I know we have a lot to work through, he said one evening, walking with me through the rose garden while Eli chased butterflies ahead of us. But I don't want to live another day waking up without the 2 of you in this house. Are you sure? I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. This isn't just about guilt or trying to fix the past, right? He turned to face me completely, his hands gently holding mine. Maya, this is about love. It's about you, and how you've always been the only person who made me feel like more than a CEO, more than a number in a magazine. And Eli, he's my heart. But you're my soul. I kissed him before I could cry too hard. Moving in was easier than I thought it would be. Eli adapted quickly, his room decorated with stars and rockets and glowing ceiling decals. Adrian made breakfast every Sunday. Well, he tried. Mostly it ended in cereal and laughter. But the biggest surprise came when Adrian insisted on taking me back to the family lake house, the same one we visited during our honeymoon. This time, though, it was different. There were candles, a simple table by the water, and Adrian standing. In front of it, with a small box in his hand. I never got to do this right, he said. Not without secrets, not without fear. So this time, Maya Bennett, not just as a partner, but as the mother of our child, the love of my life, and the woman who gave me a second chance at everything I thought I lost. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, crying, laughing, holding him until the stars blinked to life above us. The wedding was small. His close friends, a few family members, and a priest who made Eli the honorary ring bearer. He dropped the ring, once tripped twice, and stood proudly as we said our vows. I promised to never run away again, I said, my voice trembling. To face every battle beside you. To hold your hand in joy and in sorrow. To be your home. And I promise, Adrian replied, squeezing my hands gently. To love without condition. To protect without pride. And to raise our son together as a man who finally understands what matters most. We became the Coles. All 3 of us. And as time passed, Eli flourished. He made friends. He went to school. He brought home finger paintings of our family, each one more colorful than the last. Adrina and I took turns attending parent-teacher conferences. We built routines, traditions, and in all of it there was a deep, unshakable peace. The world still spun fast around U.S. stocks rising and falling, businesses growing and shifting. But within our home, we created something sacred, something constant. Love. Not the love from tabloids or corporate alliances, not the love defined by glamour or wealth, but love born of pain, rediscovered through truth, and rooted in forgiveness. As I watched Adrian play catch with Eli one summer evening, laughter echoing across the yard, I realized something. We were never broken. We were just waiting for the right time, the right flight, the right chance to come back together, and now we were home at last. The lake house had become a place of both reflection and renewal for us. Its quiet solitude offered us the space to rebuild what had once seemed lost forever. Each visit we added new memories to the old, weaving the fabric of our shared lives into something even more beautiful than I could have imagined. Time seemed to slow there, the rhythm of nature echoing our own journey of healing and growth. Eli was 8 now, and in the few short years since he came into our lives, I had watched him blossom into a kind, curious, and vibrant little boy. It was impossible to remember a time when he hadn't been part of our world, even though I knew every piece of his story, every struggle, every tear, every moment of joy we had shared together. I saw his strength in the way he faced each day, with wide-eyed wonder and determination, and when I looked at him, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Adrie and I had spent the past few years building a life that was ours, one that was grounded in a love that wasn't just romantic, but familial, unconditional, and everlasting. It wasn't always easy. In fact, it often felt like the challenges came faster than we could handle them. But we learned, together, how to weather the storms, to communicate when words weren't enough, how to laugh when the world seemed like too much, how to love through the thick and thin. But what made our home truly ours was the quiet. Everyday moments, the small touches, the shared looks, the knowing smiles that we gave each other when words weren't necessary. In the mornings, Adrien would make us coffee. His attempt at being the coffee maker still mostly ended in burnt pots, but it was the effort that counted. Ayla would come downstairs, his wild curls still tangled from sleep, and dive into the cereal we had in the pantry. Sometimes he would eat it all in one sitting, and sometimes we'd have to remind him to slow down, but either way, we were together. When I looked back on the chaos of the early years, the confusion, the pain, the fear of losing everything, it almost felt like someone else's story. We'd come so far from that place. Every twist and turn had led us to this point, this moment, where our love wasn't just a promise, it was a reality, strong and unbreakable. That day on the lake, Adrien had asked me to marry him again. His words echoed in my mind, not as a plea but as a declaration. Maya Bennett, will you marry me again? Not just as a partner, but as the mother of our child, the love of my life, and the woman who gave me a second chance at everything I thought I lost. It was the most beautiful question, and one I hadn't expected to hear. It wasn't just about the marriage, about the ceremony, or the rings. It was about the promise behind those words, the acknowledgement that we had found each other again, that we had fought for each other, that we had been willing to look beyond the mistakes and the hurt and to choose each other over and over again. And I had said yes, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because in my heart, I knew it was the only thing that truly made sense. That night, our small wedding had felt like a dream come true. I had always imagined a big, beautiful ceremony with all the pomp and circumstance. But what we had was something far more meaningful. There were only a few friends and family members, those who had witnessed our journey and who truly understood the significance of the vows we were making. Eli had been the honorary ring bearer, his little hands trembling as he held the rings, its excitement contagious. The ceremony was simple, yet it felt like the whole world was watching as Adrien and I exchanged our vows. I had promised to never run away again, to always stand beside him through every battle, to face the highs and the lows hand in hand. And Adrien had promised to love me without condition, to protect me, to raise our son together with all the wisdom he had gained through our trials. In those moments, I had realized that love, real love, wasn't about the grand gestures or the showy displays. It was about being there, through it all, the good, the bad, and everything in between. It was about showing up day after day, even when life threw its hardest challenges at us. And as I stood there, looking at Adrien, my partner, my best friend, my love, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. This was our home. It's not just the house we lived in, but the life we had built together, brick by brick, through laughter and tears, through mistakes and forgiveness. It was our forever. Eli's childhood passed by in a blur of finger paintings, school projects, and field trips. He had grown into a strong, compassionate, and intelligent boy, everything we could have hoped for and more. Adrien and I had both worked hard to give him the stability and love he deserved, to ensure he knew that he was cherished beyond words. And though we often found ourselves caught up in the everyday hustle and bustle of life work, bills, chores, there was always time for us to be together, connect, to listen to each other, to laugh. The world around us moved quickly. People came and went. Seasons changed. Businesses grew and faltered. But within our home, time moved at its own pace, creating a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. There, we built traditions, simple ones that meant the world to us. Sunday. Breakfasts that ended in laughter. Family movie nights with popcorn strewn across the living room floor. Christmases spent in front of the fireplace. Birthdays full of surprises and joy. It was easy to forget in those quiet moments just how far we had come, just how much we had fought for this life. There were times when it felt like everything had been written in the stars, that it was all meant to be. But then there were other times when it felt like the world had conspired against us, when we couldn't see the way forward, when we weren't sure if we could keep going, but somehow we always did. And now, as I sat on the porch of our lake house one evening, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky, I realized just how perfect it all was. The peace that came with knowing that no matter what happened, we had each other. The comfort of knowing that we had fought for this, and that our love had survived the toughest of trials. Adrie came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, his voice warm in the cool evening air. I leaned back into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "How we got here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "How we're finally home." He kissed the top of my head. "We made it," he said, his words simple, but full of meaning. "We've got a good life here, Maya, and we've got each other." I smiled, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the calm of the evening wash over me. "And we'll always have each other," I whispered back. "Forever." And as I sat there in the arms of the man who had helped me rewrite my story, with the stars above us and the world at our feet, I knew that this was only the beginning. That no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Our family was whole. Our love was unwavering. For the first time in my life, I truly believed that we had everything we needed. We had love. And that was enough forever. The days in the lake house had become a sanctuary for us. Its peaceful atmosphere, nestled between the trees and the water, had come to symbolize the life we had built, steady, unhurried, and filled with the warmth of a love that had been tested and proven. As I looked out over the shimmering surface of the lake, I saw in its quiet depths the reflection of our journey, sometimes turbulent, sometimes still, but always moving forward. Eli, now a lively and curious 9-year-old, spent his summer days exploring the woods behind the house, racing down to the water's edge, and asking questions that only a child with his imagination could ask. His energy was infectious, and his laughter filled the house with a lightness that reminded us both of how precious every moment was. He had learned to swim that summer, clinging to the side of the lake for dear life at first. And now he swam with the confidence of someone who knew he belonged. He was learning that the world was big, and yet it felt smaller with each step he took in it. Asher's finger paintings, which once filled our refrigerator, had been replaced by more elaborate drawings, pictures of superheroes and animals, of faraway places, and sometimes of our family, drawn with the same care and tenderness that he gave to everything he touched. He had become a thoughtful and caring boy, always asking about other people's well-being, always eager to help. It amazed me how much he had changed in the short time since we had made him part of our family. His enthusiasm for life had reignited. Something in me, a reminder of the joy in the little things, the magic of childhood, the power of hope. "Mom, can we build a treehouse?" Eli asked one afternoon as he wandered into the living room, his face beaming with excitement. He had a sparkle in his eyes, one that told me he had already imagined the treehouse as a kingdom. A place where he could rule as the king of his own. Littleworld.adrien glanced up from his magazine and raised an eyebrow. "A treehouse, huh?" "Yeah," Eli exclaimed. "You and Mom can help me make it? We can have a secret club?" Adrian smiled, his eyes softening. "I suppose we could get started on it this weekend?" He set the magazine down and looked over at me with that same playful glint in his eyes. "What do you think? Are we up for the challenge?" I laughed and nodded. "We'll need a lot of wood and nails," I said, my voice playful. "And don't forget about the ladder." Adrian stood, stretching as if he were preparing for an adventure of his own. "Don't worry, I'll make sure it's sturdy. No one's falling from my treehouse." It was moments like these, simple, shared moments, that made everything feel right, that made everything we had been through seem worth it. The stress, the uncertainty, the pain of it mattered when we were here, in this moment, building our life, one memory at a time. As time passed, our routines became sacred to us. Breakfast on Sunday mornings often, a mix of burnt toast, scrambled eggs, and laughter became a tradition. Even the mundane tasks, like grocery shopping or folding laundry, were filled with a sense of comfort. The world around us may have continued to change, but within the walls of our home, we had created something unshakable, and yet every now and then, Adrian and I would steal a moment to ourselves, away from the whirlwind of daily life, to remember where we had been. I had learned that life wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey. The road we had traveled together had been filled with obstacles, but those very obstacles had shaped us into the people we were today. One night, as the sky turned from dusky blue to indigo, I found myself standing on the porch again, just like that first time, watching the stars begin to twinkle. Adrian came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft and full of concern. "I'm more than okay," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe how far we've come." He kissed the top of my head, his hands gently squeezing my shoulders. "We've built something incredible, Maya. Together." I turned around to face him, taking his hands in mine. "I never thought I could have a life like this. I never thought I could have a second chance. But here we are." His gaze softened, and I could see the tenderness in his eyes. "We've both been given second chances, Maya. I think that's what makes this all the more precious. We didn't just find each other again. We found a whole new way of living. A way that's built on truth, honesty, and love." "I used to be so afraid of the future," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But now I know that no matter what comes our way, we'll face it together." Adrian's thumb brushed across the back of my hand as he looked at me, his gaze intense and filled with something deeper than words could express. Together, he agreed. Always. And in that moment, as the fireflies danced in the distance, and the sounds of the evening settled around us, I knew he was right. No matter what happened, no matter where life took us together was all we needed. We had already faced the impossible and come out stronger on the other side. The years continued to pass, and our life took shape like the strokes of a painter's brush, gradually, carefully, with attention to detail. We celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and the small victories that came with raising a child, each one reminding us of the power of family, of love, and of second chances. Eli grew into a young man full of promise and ambition. He excelled in school, made lifelong friends, and took pride in the things that mattered most to his family, his values, and his sense of purpose. His relationship with Adrian was one of deep respect and camaraderie. As father and son, they were inseparable, sharing inside jokes, long discussions about life, and an unspoken bond that could never be broken. Adrian and I, as partners, continued to build on the foundation we had created. ensuring that our love wasn't just a fleeting moment, but a lasting legacy. We didn't just survive together, thrived in ways we hadn't thought possible all those years ago, and in those quiet moments. When the world felt still and peaceful, I would think back to that day on the lake, when Adrian had asked me to marry him again. The question had come with no fanfare, no grand gestures, but in the simplest, most heartfelt way. And in that simplicity, I had found everything I needed. We were never broken. We were just waiting for the right time, the right flight, the right chance to come back together. And when that moment arrived, we knew it was worth everything. As I sat on the porch one warm evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The world was still full of challenges, full of uncertainties, but in this moment, I had everything I needed. Family, love, a home that was ours, filled with laughter, memories, and dreams for the future. Adrian came to join me, sitting beside me on the porch swing, his arm around my shoulders. Eli was inside, playing his favorite game on his tablet, but we knew that in the years to come, we would share these quiet moments together, just the two of us, as we always had. Do you think about it? I asked, my voice soft as I rested, my head against his chest. Think about what? He asked, his tone tender. About how it all started, I said, my eyes drifting to the stars. About how we found our way back to each other. He kissed the top of my head, holding me close. I think about it all the time, he replied, and I'll never take it for granted. And as the stars twinkled overhead, I realized that no matter what came next, we were ready. Our love, our family, was a story that had only just begun. Forever.